It's been more than 15 years since I first broke the tape at my very first triathlon. The Triathlon, held each year at the University of Tennessee's Knoxville campus, was about a 3-hour drive from my parents' house when I was in college. And I knew pretty much immediately after crossing the finish line, the very first time that I did the course, that I would probably go on to do triathlons for the rest of my healthy adult natural lifetime. Since then, there have been a couple of long course triathlon finishes, a big relocation across the country to chase a huge dream, and one of the biggest examples of if you love it, set it free to bring me back to where I find myself today. That story is the topic of this week's video. What are the decisions that initially led me into the sport of cycling? What have I been up to as a cyclist since relocating to the cycling crazy city of Tucson, Arizona in 2013? And what are the long-term goals that keeps dragging me back into this lifestyle of endurance coaching and long course triathlon? We'll be getting into all that and more in today's video. My name is Patrick, and this is My Fi Life. Hello again, and welcome back to part 2 of just who the heck is this guy talking loudly into the camera right now. We spent some time last week unpacking the story of how I came to discover the real estate industry, and so if you haven't already, definitely check out the link to that video down below in the description to find out more of a background on how all my bills get paid. But if you know 2 things about me, it's most likely number 1, that he's in real estate, and number 2, that he's a cyclist or a triathlete, or in any case he exercises probably a little bit too much. I always envisioned this channel to be an opportunity to explore both of these passions of mine. Not only to introduce my real estate clients to the world of endurance sports that I have come to love over most of my adult life, but also for my current or former training partners to find out a little bit more information about what I do for a living. And because the story of how I discovered the road bike dates back even further than discovering Rich Dad Poor Dad in the world of podcasting, we now have to take it back all the way back to the college year, back to the year 2006. I had always considered myself an athlete dating back from when I was young as I care to remember, and before college my game was always baseball. Ever since I was old enough to hold a bat upright, it seemed to be the only team sport that I had any great desire to be really good at. And I got pretty fundamentally sound at the game playing in middle school and into high school ball, but as I was entering my junior and senior year of high school, it became clear to me that my body was just not maturing and growing strong enough, fast enough to be competitive at that level. And subsequently, I didn't have any opportunities to continue to play ball in college. So, although I was able to find slower versions of the game like slow pitch softball and eventually competitive kickball, I knew that by my sophomore year of college that I was going to need to find another sort of creative endurance outlet for me to experience later on in life. And it would end up coming up from a pretty strange source. As a freshman at Middle Tennessee State University, who knew very few people on campus, I made the decision to go Greek in joining the Pi Kappa Phi fraternity. And so shout out to any Pi Kappas that might be watching this video right now. Through sheer coincidence, Pi Kappa Phi's philanthropy Push America offered something of a unique opportunity to a whole bunch of colleges. Basically the combination of fundraising efforts as well as a cross-country bike ride. And there were basically 4 versions of it. There were 3 super long versions, which we called the Journey of Hope. 3 different routes that started over on the East Coast, either in Seattle or San Francisco, in crossing the entire country to eventually finish in Washington, D.C. It was the biggest, it was the original, it was the most special program that we offered, but to me it did not sound like any fun at all. Way too much time on the road and way too little of my summer to be actually able to enjoy it. But the 4th option was a much smaller version of it. They called it Gear Up Florida, and rather than a 3,000-mile trek across the country, it was just a 700-mile trek across the state of Florida, lasting 2 weeks instead of 2 months. And that felt a whole lot more like my speed, and it was reason enough to know that I was the first and only person from my university to complete such an event. In September of 2006, I bought my very first road bike and started training. As another winter settled into Murfreesboro, Tennessee, I discovered pretty quickly that it actually sort of sucks riding a bike outside in the dead of wintertime, especially if you don't have the clothes. As someone who had grown up in northern Florida, I was pretty accustomed to swimming and taking a lot of swim classes growing up. And in doing a little bit of running as cross training for the spin classes that I was doing throughout the wintertime to keep in shape, I was aware that triathlon was something that was out there and might be a fun training day to end up trying sometime. But the triathlon bug had very much bitten me by this point, so after completing the trip from Miami to Tallahassee in the summer of 2007, I would for the very first time experience a full season of endurance racing. Since I did not appear to have any sort of genetic potential for the sport and wasn't winning any of the early races that I had entered, it always seemed more interesting to me to go longer rather than attempting to do shorter races faster. Not only did the distances sound increasingly epic to attempt, but the idea of traveling across the country for an A race of the year and tying that trip into a week of vacation sounded exciting to me at the time. And so my second full year in the sport was dedicated towards doing my first 2 middle distance races, or half Ironman triathlon. First at the Wildflower Triathlon on Lake San Antonio in Central California, and then a second smaller event that was more local to the Middle Tennessee racing calendar. But as of 2009, I had graduated college and was working a flexible job as a personal trainer, still a few years away from discovering real estate investing via the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. But with a couple of these middle distance type races behind me, I started to give a lot of thought to what my first full Ironman distance race would look like. At the time, I had aspirations of becoming a triathlon coach, and with the growing popularity of the Ironman brand, I had what seemed like 7 options in front of me. And because I had recently celebrated my 23rd birthday, I silently made the goal for myself to do one every single year. I thought that it would benefit me as a future coach to have personal first-hand racing experience for every course in the country, and if I could do one a year, I could accomplish this before my 30th birthday. That idea seemed doable, a little crazier than most ideas that I had come up with for myself in the past, and was going to be an idea that would go on to occupy pretty much the rest of my 20s. In a 4-year span between 2009 and 2012, I would go on to complete 5 Ironman triathlons. One in Madison, Wisconsin, Louisville, Kentucky, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Panama City Beach, Florida, and finally the Woodlands, Texas. And we'll go ahead and throw up my simplified race results up on the screen here. Each race took 6 to 9 months to complete and took up an entire year's PTO for every time I did one. And while the dopamine hit of finishing an Ironman triathlon felt really good for the first couple of races, because I was never able to finish a race without spending at least 6 hours completing the bike ride, without walking at least 1 full hour during the marathon, and without vomiting at least 1 time during the run. After completing race number 4, and certainly after finishing race number 5, I knew that my time for long course racing was kind of behind me. I had hoped to do another Ironman triathlon race at some point in my athletic future, but until I was physically and mentally prepared to do one of these types of events in less than 12 hours, I was going to need something else in my life. In one of the more annoying paradoxes of my early adult life, I did not study exercise science or really any type of science-based field when I was in college. Having earned a relatively useless degree in mass communication just 4 years earlier, I had turned mostly to pursuing professional certifications and reading textbooks. I had already been a personal trainer for the last 2 years by this point, and taking additional courses in sports nutrition and triathlon coaching helped me to build my experience. And it was around this time that I had heard about a job opportunity from a cycling coaching company based out of Colorado, which is owned and operated by a well-known name in the US cycling industry at this time. Now, I'm going to leave the name of that particular company out of this video to protect the innocent, and also because I no longer have any sort of relationship with that company. But I think a few of you might already know who I'm talking about. It would be my second attempt applying for this dream job, which would mean not only tutelage under some of the best coaches in the country, but a relocation out of Middle Tennessee to a presumably more cycling-friendly West Coast town, where it would be surrounded by some of the best roads and some of the best riders that we have anywhere on the national circuit. And although the seeds of building a real estate portfolio were just starting to set in, what was to come next would be a solo relocation across the country to a city who I had never so much as flown over in the past, for a job that was never even really offered to me yet. And yet somehow, I had a pretty good feeling it would work out. The next 5 years as a cycling coach primarily centered around 3 core competencies: the day-to-day coaching and consulting with my typical stable of athletes, being fit enough and logistically aware of the cycling routes enough to run our winter cycling camps, as well as a basic comprehension of the physiological underpinnings off of which an effective training methodology is based. And so in addition to working with athletes all over the world of varying skill levels on a remote basis to prepare them for the year's fitness goals. During our peak season months between November and April, we would also run a number of winter cycling camps where we would host athletes from all over the country for a week of big bike rides and usually quite a lot of local Mexican food. Now, in addition to nice perks of the job like free gear and a flexible working schedule, I was able to realize my larger goal of not only understanding the language that the best coaches in the world use, but learning how I might use this information to drive my own future training if I ever was in a position to where I was taking the sport seriously again. And just before I was about to start my 6th year in the industry, my job and life situation would take a turn once again. After I left my cycling job to pursue real estate sales full time, I not only did not own my own road bike, but it would be almost 3 years before I would consistently have any amount of time to actually go out and enjoy bike riding. My full-time focus was getting my sales-based industry off of the ground, and with the shuttering of local businesses during the years of the COVID-19 pandemic, for the first time in over 10 years, I found myself on something of an athletic sabbatical. No running, no cycling, and really no plans whatsoever to start to pick it up again. I dabbled a little bit in strength training, played a few competitive team sports, and took up gardening and lawn care for the various cross-training benefits. But by 2021, I was finally ready to get started cycling again. I had a lot more free time in my personal and business life. My personal financial situation was all in a much better place, and with a buddy of mine who offered up the extra road bike that he had sitting in his garage, I was able to dig out my old shoes and helmet out of the garage and could once again consider myself a recreational cyclist as of the summer of 2020. Since starting this most recent chapter of my personal athletic journey, I've been taking things pretty slowly. Over the last couple of years, since being back on the bike, I've been doing mostly a whole lot of low-intensity endurance riding during the nice winter months, as well as a small amount of high-intensity training when I'm able to do it consistently and my body's able to consistently recover from it. And in January of 2023, I added endurance running back into the mix. Right now, my goal is to run every single day and to build my weekly run mileage back up to perhaps the 30 to 40 miles per week range, while also maintaining my cycling fitness. Now, longer term, the idea is to continue to build up my real estate sales business, as well as to continue to invest in semi-passive cash flowing real estate opportunities, so that in years to come, if I'm able to consistently devote between 20 and 30 hours per week on training, nutrition, and recovery practices, while also spending fewer than 20 hours a week maintaining the day-to-day of my sales businesses and real estate investments, then I could absolutely see myself going back into the world of long course training and racing. Because after all, I still never have finished an Ironman without throwing up, and the idea of eventually qualifying for the world championships in the male 40 to 44 age group is, to be honest with you, something that's never really far from my own personal thoughts. So I hope you found that trip down memory lane interesting, or at least you have a better idea of why I love being a cyclist over here on the West Coast as much as I claim to. If you are interested in following my own personal athletic journey, definitely make sure you add me on Strava. That's where my day-to-day fitness workouts are going to be posted in the future as I pursue my own personal long-term fitness goals. And if you haven't done it already, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. It does a lot with help getting my channel visibility off the ground. And until next week's video, keep the rubber side down and enjoy the ride. My name is Patrick, and this has been my Philo.